Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we're going to start off with lecture number 10 of consumer behavior. Firstly, we're going to recap what we did in lecture number 9. We started off with chapter number 5 that was about consumer markets and consumer buyer behavior. We started off with the definition of consumer behavior and consumer buyer behavior. And we said consumer buyer behavior refers to the buying behavior of final consumers. Final consumers are the consumers who buy the product for themselves. And we said it takes into account the consumer market. The markets who buy the product for their final consumption are referred to as consumer market. We also took into account in the previous chapters about different markets. We said there are 5 types of markets. There's consumer market, there's reseller market, there's international market, there's business markets, and then So we're talking about the different types of markets. So one of the markets was consumer market. The consumer market is a market that consumes the product in its final form and it would not go into further transformation. And this is something that we take into account in consumer buyer behavior, the final goods that would be consumed. Then we talked about model of buyer behavior. In model of buyer behavior, we talked about marketing and other stimuli. So marketing stimuli are essentially your 4 P's. What are your 4 P's? Product, price, place, and promotion. The other factors that we took into account were more of environmental in nature. Right? So economic factors, then we talked about technological factors, then political and cultural. And we said all these marketing and other stimuli enter into the black box. Black box is actually a consumer's mind, right? And why do you call it a black box? Because whatever happens, it's very complex in nature. What happens in the black box? There are 2 things that are important in black box: the buyer characteristic and the buyer decision process. And whatever happens in the black box results in a buyer response. The buyer response may be in the form of product choice. The buyer response may be in the form of brand choice. It may be in the form of dealer choice, purchase timing. When would you like to purchase the product? And how much would you want to purchase the product? So responses could be different. Then we talked about characteristics affecting consumer behavior. So we have talked about the 4 P's. We would talk about the 4 P's in the next chapter as well. Let's talk about the other stimuli that were there. The first thing that we started was culture. Now we said culture is something that shapes your wants, right? So it shapes the needs into wants, right? And we talked about how an average person here in Pakistan might want to enjoy a lassi and somebody in the West might want to enjoy a chilled Coke in summers. That is because of difference in culture. Then we talked about subcultures. Subcultures are smaller groups within the culture. Within the bigger culture, you have smaller groups who have shared values. And we said there could be different bases for these subculture. Religion could be one, geography could be one, language could be another. So there could be different factors upon which you can create subcultures. Then we talked about social classes, the stratification that you've done in the society, the different layers, the different tiers that you have formed in the society is referred to as social classes. Now social classes are important to marketers because social class would resultantly affect the choice of the product. So somebody who is belongs to a high class or upper class, his choice of product would be different than somebody who belongs to the lower class. So your class also affects your buying behavior, the buyer characteristics as well. Then we talked about social elements, and we talked about membership groups, aspirational opinion leaders. Membership groups are the groups that you are member of, right? You regularly interact with those. And we said that your classmates are your Membership groups. Somebody who is in ComSets, his colleagues would be membership groups, right? So membership groups are all those groups that you regularly interact with. They're near you, right? On the other hand, there are aspirational groups, a group that you would want to be part of. You aspire to be part of. Then we talked about opinion leaders. Opinion leaders are the people who influence the buying behavior of an individual, right? So you go out, buy yourself a pair of jeans, you ask your friend who's fashion savvy, who knows fashion, you take his opinion and then go buy the product. So that is how he affected your purchase. So opinion leaders also create buzz in the market. Then we said your family is a strong influencer when it comes to especially this particular region, that is the Indo-Pak region, right? Family has a strong influence on what you buy, how much you buy, where to buy. So all these elements, the responses that we talked about earlier, the timing of your purchase, the amount of your purchase, it is greatly affected by your family. Then we talked about roles and status. We said with every changing role, you take different props, and the props was your assignment. What is a prop? Equipment. Costumes. Attire. So anything that would facilitate the actor in performing the role better is a prop, right? So if I'm a teacher, this pen, probably this mic would help me communicate better and present myself as a speaker in this class. So that could be my prop, right? If there's a doctor, he has a stethoscope around his neck, a coat or a white coat, that could be his prop defining his role, right? So whatever role that you're in, you need specific products to act on, to display that you're acting or you're currently playing that role. So for that role you need proper props. Then we said your age, your life cycle also affects your choice of product. As you age, the spending pattern changes. In the early age, you're more likely to party more and spend less on maybe insurance or other things. But as you age, you realize that maybe you need better health facilities in the near future. Maybe you need a pension for the coming years. So you start saving. You start spending your disposable income in that particular fashion. So as your life cycle changes, so does your consumption pattern. Then your occupation also affects your product choice. The economic situation that you're in, how much disposable income that you have, also affects your purchase. Then the lifestyle that you lead, your activities, interests and opinions. All this also affects your purchases. Then personality and self-concept. What is personality? A person's unique psychological makeup that makes him respond to environment. That is personality. So every individual has a different personality and every individual tries to find products that match his personality. That is called, you would have studied this before. No? Okay, we'll do this in the future classes. So you need to find a fit between whatever the personality of the product is and whatever your personality. If it matches your personality, then you go buy that product. That is the importance of personality when it comes to purchases. You try to find the fit between your personality and product's personality. So the assignment that we did in the other class about different brands having different brand personalities, what happens is if you want to be excited, you would probably want to choose Mountain Dew in that particular scenario. So you want to find a fit between your personality and the product's personality. Then we talked about self-concept. Self-concept is how you evaluate yourself, how positively you see yourself, what is your evaluation about yourself, not the product. Self-concept is consumer's concept about how he sees himself. Then we talked about lifestyle, psychographics, AIOs, and how you can segment your market on the basis of AIOs. AIOs are activities, interests, and opinions. Based on AIOs, you can create different segments into the society. So for instance, I say these 4 people sitting in the front row have similar AIOs, those sitting at the back have similar, those sitting at their back have similar AIOs. So based on that, I'll make a product for first line, then second line, and third line. So you could segment the market on the basis of AIOs. Now coming down to today's lecture, today we're going to talk about psychological factors that affect consumer behavior. Brand personality is something that is communicated by the company, quiet, right? So if I'm a representative of Coke, I would try to make a certain brand personality of Coke. Now if you have the similar personality as what I have tried to project, you would want to buy Coke. Okay? So that is, brand personality is not something that is created by the consumer. He might perceive it in a different way, that's another question. But brand personality essentially comes from the company. Your perception might vary.
But ma'am, we can see the brand personality in their mission statement sometimes, the way they
It does not come in mission statement. It actually comes from the advertising campaign that they run, right? So they might change the brand personality over the years. Not, it's not something that happens, every now and then. It takes a while to change, but they might change the brand personality. So for instance, Lifebuoy in previous time was a lal soap, right? But over the years they have evolved as a soap and as a company, as a brand, right? So they've created a different brand personality altogether, right? So brand personality is something that would come from your marketing campaign. It does not come in your mission statement as such. Did I clarify your question, Pranava? Any other question? Now let's get to the today's topic, that is motivation. Now what is motivation? To motivate. Okay, simply put. Anybody else? To influence someone. Very good. Anybody else? To boost up something. Anybody else? Motivation is something that make people behave as they do. That is motivation. People behave in a certain way. Why do they do? That is because of their motivation. Now there's an ideal state and then there's an actual state. Actual state is the state at the moment. Ideal state is where you would want to be, right? So the difference between the ideal state and the actual state, that would create tension. The greater the difference between ideal and actual, the greater the tension. And greater the tension, greater the drive to satisfy that situation, to reach to the ideal situation. For instance, you're thirsty at the moment, right? So for instance, you're fasting. At 5 o'clock in the morning, you're thirsty. At 12 o'clock, midday 12, you're thirsty. By the time you're about to break the fast, at that time you're thirsty. But the level of thirst is different at each level, right? So by 12 o'clock here, the difference between the ideal state and the actual state is much greater, right? So the drive to satisfy that need would be much greater. Probably the drive would be far less at 5 o'clock in the morning when you have just started off with the fast, right? So the difference between the ideal and actual state would define how much your would decide the difference between the two. Now let's get to motivation. Motivation has been explained by two different, it has been explained by many different theorists, but two main theories that we're going to study today. One is by Sigmund Freud and the other one is Maslow's, right? So Sigmund Freud theory talks about subconscious, right? So Sigmund Freud says that your purchase behavior is not simple as you state, right? So what he says is that it is your subconscious that governs your purchase decision, somewhat, right? So if I ask you directly a question, why did you buy the product? You might not answer the actual motive, or you might not report the actual motive that you bought the product for, because you might not know the actual motive. The actual motive has come from your subconscious, and subconscious is something that you're not aware of. Subconscious is something that is not on your awareness level, right? So you're not fully aware at the moment about what is happening in your subconscious. But subconscious affects your purchase decisions. And based on this particular theory, there's a research group that is called motivational research. So motivational research or motivation research is a research that is done on the basis of the work of Sigmund Freud. Now, what do you do in motivation research? You take a respondent, you interview him, and you interview him in depth. And what you try to do is, you try to unearth the subconscious motive of the individual for a particular purchase. And then that subconscious motive could be incorporated in your advertisement, and that could result in a more robust advertising campaign, right? Questions on this? Questions? Everybody understood? Great. Now the second theory in motivation was, the first one was that of Sigmund Freud, the second one is Maslow's theory. Now Maslow's theory talks about different needs a person might have. They might be biological, they might be psychological needs. So the first and the foremost need and the most pressing need is your physiological need. Physiological need is food, your basic need. The basic need is food. You cannot survive without food. Basic need, physiological need without which survival would not be possible. Once that need has been satisfied, you move up the ladder. You try to safeguard yourself. You would want to protect yourself, right? So you would move up the ladder. Once you've protected yourself, then comes the next need. You will go up the ladder again. You would go to social need. Once social need has been, what is social need? The need to interact with people. The need for love, the need for sense of belonging. This is an inherent need that a person has. Then once that need is satisfied, you go up the ladder, you want esteem needs. You want to be respected, you want to be recognized, you want to be given a certain status. That is esteem needs. And once that need has been satisfied, you go on top of the ladder, that is self-actualization, where you realize your true potential. That is top of the ladder. That's where your prime goal is. That's where you would want to be. So that is self-actualization, where you have realized what your true potential is. So over the years, you've realized that you have brilliant writing skills. You could be a very good novelist. Probably you've found your self-actualization spot, right? Over the years, you've realized that you're an excellent speaker, you're an excellent trainer. Probably you've reached your self-actualization state. So according to Maslow, it is a ladder. You cannot skip one need and go to the other need. So you have to follow the sequence. Once your psychological need is satisfied, physiological need is satisfied, only then you can move to safety need. Once safety need is satisfied, only then you would move up the ladder. So you cannot skip the ladder and move to the next point. So from one point you cannot go straight to the self-actualization level. So that is the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of need that talks about different, particularly 5 types of needs and its sequence. Questions on this?
Ma'am, every consumer may have like different, may belong to different levels. Then how come we can like understand the consumer behavior by this hierarchy of needs? Because every consumer must be in different level of needs, pursuing different level of needs.
Right. So whatever the nature of your product is, for instance, the nature of your product is, let's say you make mineral water, right? So what need would you want to show in your advertisement? Physiological. It's physiological. The most common mistakes that students make in the paper is they write psychological need.
I was saying how can we understand the consumer behavior, as every consumer must have different, must belong to different level of needs.
Right. So that you're trying to satisfy the physiological need. Now you would depict that in your advertisement, that you're satisfying the physiological need, and based on that need you could hit any other target, right? So for instance, if that need is satisfied, you will reach the self-actualization level whereby everybody would be attracted to you if you're consuming Coke, or you would connect it with the esteem need, or you would connect it to the safety need. But the basic need that you're satisfying, that needs to be depicted in your advertisement. Okay? What is perception? Another important psychological factor.
Understanding about
whatever you perceive and then.
Okay.
your understanding about something.
Okay. Anybody else?
Beliefs.
Your thoughts. Right. Ideas. Right. It is the perception of happiness that matters. So nothing is real for sure. It is how you create your world. Now this world is socially constructed, right? It is not based on objective reality. Rather than what is true is what you believe is true, right? So you need to see the positive aspects of life to remain happy. So it is the perception that matters, not the reality that matters. It is the world that you create around yourself that makes you happy, and not the actual world. That is perception. In a more psychological term, perception is the process by which people select, organize, and interpret the information. Now, if I run an advertisement here, there are 30 people sitting in this classroom, 30 different ideas or 30 different ways of perception I could experience by asking you, what did you see, right? So every person perceives the idea differently. He organizes the idea differently. He selects the idea firstly differently. He organizes the idea differently, and then he interprets the idea differently. Why does everybody interprets the idea differently? That is because our belief, our underlying belief about ideas is different. So our schema, the thought process, the belief about everything is different for every individual. And you organize the information based on what you already know, right? So that's how perception differs for every person, since every person has a different schema. What is schema? Your total belief, right? So your total belief about anything is schema. So since everybody has a different schema, therefore the perception of everyone is different. Another factor that affects is attention. So the perception, the attention level is different. Since the attention level is different, therefore perception would differ, right? So perception includes selective attention, it includes selective distortion and selective retention. Now selective attention is what? You're bombarded with average 4,000 or 5,000 ads a day, right? How much do you retain? Not more than 20, 30 maybe, right? So that is selective attention. You choose to select what you pay attention to, and that's psychic economy, right? Attention is a scarce commodity, right? So these days what marketers do, they try to attract eyeballs rather than dollars. The dollars would follow, right? That's the idea of marketing these days, that you want to get the attention. Why do you want to get the attention? Because attention is a scarce commodity, right? So what happens in selective information? Consumers screen out information, so you cannot process it. It's not humanly possible to pay attention to 4,000 ads a day. It would be too much burden for an average consumer. So what he does is he selects what he wants to pay attention to. That is selective attention. Now coming down to selective distortion, what would be selective distortion? What would be selective distortion? Selective distortion is whatever information that is coming into you, you distort it as per your liking or as per your belief, right? So if you dislike a person, if you feel that half the time he's telling lie, if he tells something that is true, you might not want to believe him. That is selective distortion. You've distorted the information that is coming to you based on your existing belief about that person, right? So that is selective distortion. Then what would be selective retention?
Selectively retain the information that you want to retain or believe.
You remember the information that you would want to remember, right? So if there's a negative aspect to something that you like, you would want to forget that, right? So that is selective retention. You would want to only remember the good in that person, right? Quiet. Any questions on this? No question? What is learning? Another important psychological factor. Quiet. Now, learning describes a change in individual's behavior arising from experience, right? So a relatively permanent change in behavior is learning, right? The last part of it, arising from experience, you may agree with it, you may not agree with it, right? So learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior. Now, learning may be passive, learning may be incidental. So a passive learning is, or incidental or passive, one at the same thing. So the learning may be active. For instance, in this case, the 5 people who are listening in this class, they are actively learning. They're trying to seek information. They're trying to learn about consumer behavior. That is active learning. Somebody who passes by this lecture hall and he hears something about learning, he has passive learning. That is incidental learning. He didn't intend to learn about that, yet he learned about it. That is incidental learning. You're sitting in the cafe, you're having your food, somebody sitting at the back is talking about a particular probably device, and you overhear what he's talking about. So that is incidental or passive learning. You didn't intend to learn it, yet you learn it. So learning may be active or it may be passive.
Ma'am, can we say that learning from through experiences or with experience is passive learning? Learning something through experiences or through failure or
That's passive learning? Not really. Not really. The two schools of thought, when we would study in the future courses in consumer behavior, the two schools of thought, that there's a behavioral school of thought and then there's a cognitive school of thought. Now, behavioral school of thought does not take experience into account. It just takes a stimulus response model, whereas the cognitive school of thought takes into account the human thinking, the human cognition, the human experience, the human observation, right? So there are two schools of thought. So let's keep it simple here. Any other question? No question? Now, learning occurs through drive, stimulus, cues, and reinforcement. Drive, as we earlier talked about, this difference between your ideal and actual state creates a drive. The stimulus is what? In that particular scenario, thirst was the stimuli that created, that led you to go to the ideal state. That is the stimuli. And the cues are the minor stimuli that affect the response, right? So you want to go buy, buy yourself a pair of jeans. There's a sale going on, or there's an offer, buy one get one free. That could be a minor cue that could affect your purchase. And reinforcement is the feedback that you get. So you wear those jeans, come to the university the next day, and people compliment you, you get positive feedback. That means money well spent. So that is learning. Now coming down to belief and attitude. What is belief? Belief is a descriptive thought about a brand, right? So it could be based on your knowledge, it could be based on your opinion, it could be based on your faith. So a descriptive thought about a brand, that is belief, right? So it has this, it has that quality, the price range is so, this is the overall brand personality of the brand. If I wear this, people would be attracted. So this is the belief about the brand. Based on that belief, you have attitudes, right? So attitude may be positive, it may be negative. If you have a positive attitude, it might lead to purchase. If you have a negative attitude, it might not lead to purchase about a certain product. So what is attitude? Attitude describes a person's evaluation, feeling, tendencies towards an object or idea. And they're difficult to change. They do change, but they're very difficult to change. There's a lot of effort that needs to be put in to change the attitude towards a certain product. It takes time, it takes money, it takes a lot of effort to change the attitude. So attitudes are relatively difficult to, or relatively permanent, right? So we're done with the first part of the model that we did in lecture number 9. That was the consumer buyer model, right? So 4 P's and the other stimuli. We're down to the black box, and the first thing that we're going to study is types of decision behavior. Now there could be, if you see the grid here, there is high involvement. What is high involvement? Where you're actively trying to seek information. You go onto the website, you go ask people, you go ask opinion leaders, you go to the store, ask the sales representative there. So you seek information in high involvement products. And in low involvement product, not so much, right? So there would not be a lot of information search involved in low involvement. Now in complex buying behavior, if you see here, there's high involvement. You would want to seek all the information that is possible, and then there would be significant differences among the brands, right? So for instance, if you're going to buy yourself a laptop, there would be significant difference between what Mac Airbook has to offer, what HP has to offer, what Dell has to offer. So there could be significant differences between these brands. So that would be a complex buying behavior. On the other hand, there would be dissonance reducing buying behavior. Now in dissonance reducing buying behavior, you also are highly involved in the purchase. You want to seek information. You want to go see the alternatives available. But the problem here is that the alternatives that are available are very close by, right? So there's not much difference between the brands. So let's say if you want to buy yourself, a very good example in your book is that of curtains. So if you want to buy yourself, your room curtains, there wouldn't be much of difference between different brands that are available. There might not be much of difference between different brands available. So you go buy the brand that is offering you lower price maybe, or it is easier to buy the product from. So that is dissonance reducing behavior, whereby you go buy the product that is maybe cheaper, maybe easily available, since there's no significant difference between the brands as such. On the other hand, there's variety seeking behavior, low involvement, and there's significant differences between the brands, right? So you go buy you go and do your groceries. Every time you go, you probably buy a different brand of biscuits for yourself. You want to try out different brands. It is not a high involvement decision, yet you want to try different tastes that are available in the market. So that is a variety seeking behavior where you would want to try out new products. The next one is habitual buying behavior. Now in habitual buying behavior, what happens is that you go buy a brand out of habit, right? So there is no particular reason, there's no particular thought process that goes into buying the product, right? So you go buy yourself a particular soap, you do it always, your mother has done it, you do it, you buy it out of habit. You go buy yourself a certain quality of salt, you do it out of habit. So this is habitual buying behavior. Questions on this grid? Now 5 roles people might play in buying decision. They could be initiator, the person who gives you the idea first. They could be influencer, people who could influence you in making the decision. There could be deciders who play an important role in your decisions. So probably your mother goes with you while you're shopping, your father accompanies you while shopping. They could be the decider, the buyer who makes the actual purchase, and the user who would use the product or service purchase. So there are 5 people that might play an important role in buying decision. Now that's a buyer decision process. There is need recognition. First you try to find what you need. There's a need that has come up and you want to satisfy the need. Then you would go for information search, get all the possible information if you can. If it's a high involvement decision, if it's a low involvement decision, not so much maybe. Then you evaluate the alternatives that you have searched, which alternative is better. You do the cost benefit analysis, which particular alternative gives you the maximum benefit and costs you the least, and followed by the purchase decision, and then finally post-purchase. Now coming down to the first element of your buyer decision process. The first element is need recognition. Now need can be triggered by 2 stimuli. It could be an internal stimuli, it could be an external stimuli. An internal stimuli would be something from within, right? So you're thirsty, nobody else knows you're thirsty. That's your internal stimuli. Only you can tell you're thirsty, right? The other stimuli could be external stimuli. The advertisement, the friends of friends, they could be external stimuli. Then once the need has been recognized, there could be that you can go on with the information search. Now in information search, there could be various sources of information search. There could be personal sources, your family, friends. There could be commercial sources. Then there could be public sources, mass media, consumer rating, and then experiential sources. Experiential sources would be you handling the product yourself. So your friend buys a new mobile phone, you tell him, can I have a look at it? That is you experiencing the product. When you experience the product, that is also a good source of information search. Then you go towards evaluating the alternatives. Whatever the alternatives are available to you, you evaluate it on the basis of what it's going to cost you and how much benefit that you can get out of that product. So there's not always one attribute that you're doing the cost benefit analysis on. So probably if you're buying a phone, look, how does the phone look? You know, what is its performance, how much is the RAM, what is the display quality, what other features are important in a phone? RAM, camera, space. So all these factors, all these are attributes of a good mobile phone, and you rate each alternative on these attributes and see which one gives you the maximum benefit. Right. So this is total consideration set, there's awareness set, then there's consideration set, there's choice set, and then there is decision. So the different sets that are there, and every time you enter a new set, the number of options reduce. So the total number of sets you can see, there are a lot many. Then the ones that you're aware of are even lesser. Then the ones that you consider for purchase, they're far lesser. The choice set, the ones that you're going to choose from, even lesser. And then finally, decision one. Then coming down to the purchase decision, now two factors are important: the attitude and unexpected situational factors that are important in your purchase decision. Once you've purchased the product, there is post-purchase. What is post-purchase?
After the purchase. That has been purchased. Then you retain the purchase or
How? Okay. Once you've used the product, what is your opinion about that product? Would you go buy that product again? Would you recommend it to other people or not? Would you have it? Would you give it a positive word of mouth or negative word of mouth? That is your post-purchase behavior. So post-purchase behavior is extremely important to marketers because it would result in further sale of the product and further marketing of the product as well. So if you've experienced negative, you've experienced the product and you have a negative attitude toward the product, probably you would have a negative word of mouth. And negative word of mouth is far more detrimental for a company than positive word of mouth, right? So what marketers try to do is they want to create maximum positive word of mouth. Now, the stages in the adoption process for new products is the one that that is currently on display. The first one is awareness. The person firstly becomes aware of the product. Then he shows interest in that product. Once he's shown interest in that product, he would evaluate the product. Once he's evaluated the product, he would go for trial. So trial would be on a smaller level. Once he's tried the product, he would lastly go for the purchase, the full purchase of the product or the regular use of the product. Now all these steps that you see here is that of adoption process for new products. So new product could be good services. Now this is individual differences in innovation and the process of adapting to innovation. This is something that you're going to study on your own and we will discuss it in the next class. I want you to go home and give it a read. Right? With this we've come to the end of the lecture.